English translation, 364th contact. Friday, 13th August 2004. Isuayatoim, 04 hours.
It was nice to hear you again at 20 hours during our correction work. Bernadette sends you her greetings, of course, and I would like to also greet and welcome you, dear friend.
You be greeted as well. And I also want to greet Bernadette, as well as all the members of the group, of course. In fact, I have now expressed it correctly. It is good to see you up and around. I heard about your accident. I know Quetzal treated you. Let me see your hand. I do not understand because it does not look good despite Quetzal's treatment. The rejoined tendon is badly torn, as I see here with my device, also the vein and the muscles. It must hurt you quite a lot, but we should not do anything about it. But let everything heal naturally now, which will continue to cause you pain for about 3 or 4 weeks, but will prevent you from making too much effort with your hand and fingers. I see that you have also maltreated all other fingers except the thumb. Although the little finger is now back in contact with the ring finger, this will only be temporary, because when everything is fine again, it will stick out by about 12 to 15 degrees, but that should not bother you too much. It would be good if the little finger and the edge of the hand were tied with a support splint, and you would not do any work for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
It is my fault, because after Quetzal patched up my little finger, or the tendon of my finger, I had another accident. It happened like this. Silvano and I were driving the old Volvo, and because it was nice and warm, I opened the side window of the car. Later, when I turned it back up, I caught my infuriating little finger in the plastic side compartment of the car door, because it was broken and protruded inwards. As a result, I tore my finger back again, which is why everything is still swollen and bloodshot. But because of the protrusion of 12 to 15 degrees, with some practice, therapy, and good control, I will certainly be able to keep my little finger straight.
With you, I know that these are not empty words and that you can really accomplish it. But you really should not strain your hand with work for the next few weeks, neither with hard work nor with your computer activity. For our part, we will wait for the completion of what we have asked you to do.
That is easy to say, my friend, but to be idle and to nurse myself in idleness is not my métier.
I know that very well. Remember, however, that every effort and movement of the hand and fingers does not contribute to healing, but quite the opposite, because further damage can result.
Of course, I feel the need to make an effort, not to put too much effort.
That corresponds to my wish.
Then we are done with this subject. You said at our last contact meeting that you would tell me some important things about the future at a later date. May I ask you what other important facts you can name by looking ahead?
I have agreed to this, so it should be that I still mention some things. I will begin by continuing the Pope's visit to Lourdes, because this will be his last trip there. Because with it, his state of health will begin to deteriorate rapidly, which will inevitably lead, according to our prognosis, to his death on the date I have already given you on the 6th of April, 1990. It will be that his condition will seemingly improve again, but it is really only an appearance, because he will finally go his last way after the visit to Lourdes. I want to continue with an event that will take place in China in the middle of August, because it will be that there, too, like a short time before in Japan, a very serious landslide will cause a lot of damage, which will be calculated in a higher sum of millions of Swiss francs. Further, it will turn out that our contact discussions and your remarks in your bulletins are slowly beginning to bear fruit in the USA. The efforts of your USA representative, Michael Horn, who not only wrote an important letter with our and your statements to the Bush administration, and thus also to Bush, will also contribute a lot to this because his lectures and radio broadcasts, etc., are also very important factors. So it will result that in connection with our statements and your article publications in relation to the fact that there can only be peace on the earth and a third world fire can be prevented if the Americans generally withdraw to the USA from all foreign countries, first steps will be taken in this regard. Admittedly, these will only be plans in advance, but some things will be done in the right direction. On the other hand, it is unfortunately only not yet clear whether the whole thing will finally be put into action, because unfortunately, from the outset, Bush will once again make everything a lie, because he and all those who go with him will claim that the withdrawal of some 70,000 militarized and some 100,000 unmilitarized persons will be for the purpose of better combating terrorism, and that it was decided before the Iraq War, for which plans had already been made. Sheer lies. Because George W. Bush in particular is frightened by our statements and your statements and bulletin articles, as well as the old prophecies of Jeremiah, Elijah, and Enoch that have come to his attention, and he will therefore try to counteract everything. Elsewhere in Iraq, the terrorist attacks on the oil pipelines will continue and cause much damage, like the insurgents and terrorists who will continue their bloody trade. Unfortunately, peace will not come soon. But, on the contrary, insurgency, terror, and bloodshed and destruction will continue, including on the part of the occupying forces, which, unfortunately, will continue to prove bloody in the coming days. Something strange will happen in the USA, because it will happen that in the Valley of Extreme Drought, in the Death Valley, a large mudslide will form, which will cause the loss of some human lives. Also, the storms do not come to an end, but multiply and intensify all over the world. So already in the next few days in England, in a place called Boscastle, a huge tidal wave will destroy many things completely, whereby the damage must be calculated with financial amounts in the millions. Besides the fact that also human lives will have to be lamented, which, however, will not be obvious at first, but will only be recognized later. Wild floods will also cause a lot of disaster and claim human lives in India, France, Japan, and South Korea, and all over the world, just as wild floods will cause a lot of damage, distress, and suffering in the city of Istanbul in Turkey. New Zealand will also be affected. But by a huge snowstorm, while worldwide there will also be big windstorms and huge landslides due to storms. As for example in South Korea, Japan, also in Switzerland and Scotland, etc. Whereas in Scotland there will even be a whole series of big landslides. In some places, the rock slides and landslides will not only lead to great material destruction and great financial loss, but some events will also be accompanied by the loss of human lives. There will be no end to the storms in the future, because the very extreme weather conditions are becoming more and more frequent and are accompanied by climate change, which on the one hand can no longer be stopped, and on the other hand is due to about 50% to the culpable machinations against nature by the Earth humans. A storm of the American occupying forces in Iraq, together with the military under the leadership of the transitional government, against the insurgents of the Shiite, preacher Muqtada al-Sadr begins on the 18th-19th of August, which will lead to many deaths and to destruction by American bomb attacks and tank guns, etc. The attack of the occupying forces will also have the consequence that many Shiites, even moderate ones, will take up arms and fight against the occupying forces. The insurgents will also attack and set fire to the South Oil Company situated in the south of the country. This, along with the sabotage of oil pipelines, and which will continue when the fanatical preacher of violence Muqtada al-Sadr goes underground, means that sabotage and other terrorist acts will continue underground. Bird flu will also come to the fore again, not only as a result of its resurgence, but also because its transmission to animals is at last being recognized, and first and foremost to pigs, through which people in turn can fall victim to the epidemic. In the USA, too, an epidemic is spreading again, namely West Nile virus, which will once again cause many deaths. The forest fires are also continuing, with Nice in France and Corsica and Sardinia being the first to be affected. As far as earthquakes are concerned, there will also be further developments, affecting not only all the countries of the world but also Europe, not only in August but also during the rest of the year and in the future, as the Earth continues to rise up. Some of them will be more severe, others lighter, which is hardly spoken about, such as the first in Europe in the month of August, namely in Germany, where a whole series of quakes will take place, which will not exceed the normal average strength of the many unremarkable quakes on a small scale, which cause small earth tremors several hundred times a year in Europe. Greece will also be affected by earthquakes, as will California in the USA, which is particularly vulnerable to severe quakes. And what has to be said about storms in August is that they will continue in the wise that has already been explained, and will cause a lot of disaster worldwide, causing serious damage and costing human lives. This will be the case in large parts of Germany and Switzerland, as well as throughout Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and various parts of North, Central, and South America, with a number of hurricanes in particular, as I mentioned earlier. Africa and the Middle and Far East will also be severely and increasingly affected. In the Far East, a whole series of typhoons will be raging, whereby a very severe one shortly after the 20th of August will bring a lot of disaster over Taiwan and bury a whole village in a huge landslide before hitting China with great force and causing great damage. The Philippines will also be affected by severe storms and landslides. It is to be said of Northern Europe that it will be hit by violent hurricanes and tornadoes, to which it is also to be added that the nature of these storm events will spread more and more to Central Europe and eventually to the areas of the South, although the latter will not occur until later. Then it will also occur that an explosion in the Texas state of the USA will cause the gas from an underground gas storage facility to erupt, creating a column of fire several hundred meters high that will last several days. It also occurs that in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, there will be a serious terrorist attack which will cause both deaths and injuries. Likewise, a series of attacks by Chechen rebels on a police station in Chechnya will be carried out, with deaths and injuries, as in the case of the train station in Dusseldorf, Germany, where a jealousy drama will take place and a bloody shootout will take place, resulting in deaths, without bloodshed. However, a brazen armed robbery of the Munch Museum in Oslo, Norway, takes place in connection with an art theft of the well-known old works of art by the painter Edvard Munch, The Scream, and Madonna, whose value will be in the tens of millions of euros. France will not be spared from disaster either, as it will happen that a Jewish center in Paris is the subject of a serious arson attack. A whole series of bomb attacks will take place in southern Thailand, while in India the Ganges River will cause great flooding, and elsewhere in various countries, including in Central, Southern, Eastern, Northern, and Western Europe. Already this month of July, a large series of small and large plane crashes will begin worldwide, which will cause many human lives to be lost. In Venezuela, for example, there will be a plane crash that will claim a large number of victims, including high-ranking military personnel. Russia will also be affected by two similar events in which around 100 humans will lose their lives. The two Russian plane disasters are the result of hijackings of planes by radical Chechen terrorists, suicide bombers who carry heavy explosives and then detonate them at a fixed time approximately simultaneously, tearing up the plains. But these are only two events that take place in this form, because there will be several other terrorist attacks worldwide. These events take place around the time when your friend Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the USA will take her last breath and thus depart from life on the evening of the 24th of August. Before that, however, it will be that in Iraq, the American occupying forces and the Iraqi military will finally surround the area around the Imam Ali Mosque in the holy pilgrimage city of Najaf and cause great material damage to buildings, with hundreds of people ultimately being killed by the whole enterprise, including in other places in other parts of the country. Even the holy mosque will not be spared from damage, which will create bad blood among the entire Shiite population of Iraq and will further fuel the hatred against the American occupying forces and their followers from all states stationed in Iraq and cause it to flare up more and more. This will be one reason why the most influential Ayatollah, Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, will return from England to put an end to the fighting. Torture and killings by the occupiers and those insurgents who are under the command of the radical preacher Muqtada al-Sadr, who himself orders torture and killings in the Imam Ali Mosque, where and all around eventually about 600 al-Sadr followers and victims are found dead. Muqtada al-Sadr is a ruthless and barbaric murderer who must be held accountable by law. Through the initiative of Ali al-Sistani, a peace demonstration train is being organized to Najaf, but on its way, it will be fired upon by Iraqi police forces and by the U.S. occupying forces and will cause about as many deaths as an attack on peace demonstrators at the Kufa Mosque, in which many lives will also be destroyed, with both incidents causing about 50 deaths and a total of well over 100 deaths in further shootings by the police. Nobody wants to take the blame for the massacres, which is why both the U.S. occupying forces and the police will deny everything and blame each other. The Grand Ayatollah's efforts will be to find a peace agreement with Muqtada al-Sadr and the withdrawal from the Imam Ali Mosque, as well as the withdrawal of the U.S. occupying forces from the holy pilgrimage city of Najaf. A project that will also be largely successful, but this does not mean that the terror in Iraq by insurgents and the occupying forces will come to an end. Unfortunately, another hostage, an Italian journalist, will also be murdered. The fault of the Italian government, which is irresponsibly allowing an ultimatum from the insurgents to elapse without action to withdraw Italian troops from Iraq by the 26th of August at the latest. Shortly afterwards, 2 Turkish hostages are murdered and French hostages are also taken in order to issue an ultimatum to abolish the ban on headscarves in schools, etc., under threat of their murder in France. Also on the 26th of August in Germany, in North Rhine-Westphalia, it will be revealed that a vehicle carrying dangerous goods, fully loaded with large quantities of petrol, more than 30,000 liters, as a result of a collision with an out-of-control passenger vehicle on the A4 motorway, breaks through the railing of the so-called Veal Valley Bridge near Gummersbach, and plunges about 10 meters down a slope and onto a building, explodes and creates a flame inferno, whereby the bridge is also affected by the intense heat of about 1,000 degrees. This will also be the time when Mali and Mauritania in Africa will be hit by a new locust invasion, which will also spread to Sudan.
One moment, please. One question in between before I forget. Regarding the extraterrestrial artifacts that will one day be found on Mars by the Earthlings. Can you tell me what these discoveries are about? It was mentioned at a contact meeting in the past. Actually, I was not interested in what the finds were about. But some time ago, someone asked me about it. But I could not answer the question, so I am asking you for an explanation now. The term artifact, if I may mention it, comes from the Latin arte, which means, as far as I know, skill, while the fact also comes from Latin, from factum, which is translated as made, or the made. Archaeologically, artifact therefore also means that something has received its form through human influence, that something has been made with craft or skill.
Your explanation explains the term artifact clearly and openly. The discoveries made in more distant times by the Earth humans on the planet Mars are usually only artifacts that were created by human influence in various Martian rocks and are often misunderstood as human work of art.
A short and concise answer. Then everything will not be of great importance and nothing world-shattering. But now please continue your predictions.
Good. There are only a few days left to deal with. Then the predictions for the month of August that you asked me to make are finished. There is also a whole series of bus accidents of a global nature, such as in Kazakhstan, Switzerland, Morocco, Arab and Eastern countries, France, etc., which will unfortunately claim many lives and injured. Then it will happen in the capital of Afghanistan, in Kabul, that an act of terrorism by the Taliban will take place, whereby a suicide bomber will detonate a large bomb and more than 20 humans, including Americans, will be killed. However, the American occupying forces and the responsible rulers deny and minimize the large number of deaths in order to minimize everything in relation to the terrorists, to make them believe that they will not achieve their goals. This will also be the time when the Olympics of Shame in Athens will come to an end, because it must be described as such as a result of the more than 20 cases of doping, which no longer have anything to do with honest sporting competition, but only with titles, image, greed for money and prizes, etc. Moreover, various cases of doping with new drugs will not be detected at the 2004 Olympics, while in the future doping with old and new drugs will become more and more blatant in all physical sports. At about the same time, more than 100 German tourists contaminated with hepatitis A will return from Egypt to Europe, which means that the disease could spread at least in Germany if the necessary protective measures are not taken. Then it will happen that the ceasefire in Sudan will be broken once again. And as a result, government troops and rebels will break into several villages in the Darfur region, raze everything to the ground, and massacre and kill many humans. At the same time, in the USA, in New York, there will be a mass demonstration by hundreds of thousands of humans against the re-election of the U.S. President George W. Bush, who is a criminal of humanity, while in Florida, Bush's like-minded and irresponsible people will be shouting pro and hurrah for him. Before the ultimatum concerning the French hostages expires, which is to blackmail the abolition of the headscarf ban, 12 hostages are already being murdered in Iraq, namely Nepalese. As far as the Gulf of Mexico is concerned, it is clear that there will be talk of a very large oil deposit, which of course is to be exploited unreasonably. It will also be the time when a strong typhoon will cause a lot of damage, landslides and deaths in Japan, while in Europe it will be known that in Italy, in the Dolomites, the population of the ibexes is endangered by the mange disease and is threatened with extinction. There is a danger that the mange will spread to the north and Switzerland if the necessary defensive measures are not taken. In German Bavaria, a hateful person with a whole series of letter bombs will try to murder officials of the authorities, as has been the case for some time. But this is being kept quiet for reasons of investigation. Towards the end of August, the export of petroleum products is stopped in Iraq, which means that fuel prices are set at a high level as a result of large pipeline fires caused by terrorist attacks. Then the month of August ends with 2 bloody incidents in Russia and Israel. After almost 6 months of no suicide bombings from the Palestinian side in Israel, at the end of August, the time will come again for an attack on 2 fully occupied so-called commuter buses, which will cost first about 20, then about 30 lives. Also in Russia, and namely at the Riga railway station in Moscow, a suicide bomber will carry out an attack which will also kill about 20 humans, along with many who will suffer injuries. That, my friend, is the forecast until the end of August this year. After that, it will continue in the same vein worldwide, sometimes much worse. That is all that should be said, and besides, it is time for me to go again because I must go. Goodbye.
Take care, Salome, and goodbye. And thank you very much for your remarks.